Welcome to Spindle and Spoon Homestead, your place for simple living and hand spinning. Today I'm going to show you how to make eggnog from scratch. So I start eggnog with frozen egg yolks. And you don't have to do this, you just need a lot of egg yolks. But every October my son requests an angel food cake for his birthday cake. And that only requires egg whites, a dozen of them, and so I save the egg yolks for making eggnog later. And to save egg yolks, you just put them in a jar in the freezer and just use them before they get super old. They do come out kind of weirdly textured, semi-solid, even though they're thawed in this video here. It's kind of weird, but just trust the process. And you're going to whisk them with sugar. In this recipe, I've got 12 egg yolks mixed with 1 cup of sugar, and you're going to blend those with the whisk until they're smooth and creamy and not all lumpy and gritty. So you can use a stand mixer, but you can also just whisk this by hand. It doesn't take super long. You can see how the texture is changing from something really chunky to something smooth and creamy, and the color is also changing to a pale yellow rather than a bright egg yolk yellow. So that's what you're looking for. This is just a way that I like to make sure I use those egg yolks before they are like freezer burned and old. And I really don't like wasting food, so making an angel food cake with 12 egg whites, there's no way I'm going to let those egg yolks go to waste. But if you just have whole eggs, you can separate your egg yolks to use in this eggnog recipe. And you can also freeze the egg whites and make something with them later. Just the same thing, put them in a jar, freeze them, and thaw them don't put them in the microwave to thaw or they'll cook. But you can use them to make meringue or angel food cake or royal icing, whatever egg white recipe that you can think of. Alright, so this is looking good. It should look like this. This is just the egg yolks and the sugar whisked together. In a separate large pot, you're going to pour in 4 cups of milk and 2 cups of heavy whipping cream. And also add about 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. That's like 2 pinches of salt, roughly. And you also want to use some ground nutmeg. I'm using whole nutmeg and grating it on this microplane zester thingy. It grates it really fine, and I love using this for nutmeg. So you need 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. You can also put ground cinnamon in as well if you really like cinnamon. I will try to find this zester and link an Amazon affiliate link below if I can find it. I've had it for a very long time and it's really nice. You can just put it straight over a bowl or a pot and zest your lemons or oranges or whatever, or grate your nutmeg or ginger. It works really well. Then you're going to turn the heat up to medium or medium-high, and you're going to stir it fairly constantly because you don't want the milk to scald at the bottom. I started out with a wooden spoon, but then switched to a whisk to get that nutmeg evenly mixed in. And you're going to heat it until it is just barely simmering. And with milk and cream, it kind of forms a skin on top when you heat it up, you know. So it can be hard to see when it's simmering, so make sure that you're stirring it and paying attention. Basically, what I found is that the surface, it doesn't really bubble. It just barely starts quivering a little bit. And if you're really looking closely, you can see that it is bubbling just barely, just beneath the surface. And that's what you're looking for. So it's not quite there yet in this video. It's getting a little steamy. but not simmering yet. Now, if you look at the surface, you can see it kind of quivering a little bit. And it's very steamy, and it seems like it's just almost at the point of bubbling, like boiling, but not quite. This is just right for the next step. And the next step is to temper your egg yolk mixture, which means adding the hot liquid a little bit at a time while whisking to make sure that your egg yolks don't scramble and get all chunky. If you just pour the liquid in, the hot liquid into the egg yolks without stirring and doing it slowly and carefully, the egg yolk mixture will get really chunky and lumpy and gross. So you gotta add it a little bit at a time while stirring. And this is where the stand mixer really comes in handy because it does the mixing for you. But you can also just do this without a stand mixer. And what this is doing is cooking the egg yolks, but not in such a way that they scramble. And if this part is difficult and it doesn't go well for you and you start seeing a few lumps, it's most likely going to be fine, so just hang in there. You can strain out the lumps at the very end. So as long as it's not like completely lumpy and there's just a few lumps, it'll be okay. At this point, I decided to pour it from the mixing bowl into the pot because I decided that the egg yolk mixture was heated up sufficiently. So I'm pouring it back in with the rest of the hot milk liquid and whisking. And the last big step is to heat it up to 160 degrees while stirring constantly. This finishes cooking the egg yolks so they're fully cooked, and it helps thicken the eggnog slightly. And then I accidentally heated it up too much, but it was still delicious. So don't worry if you heat it up a little too much, but do keep an eye on it, because I noticed that in the end my eggnog was a tiny bit grainy. Okay, here I'm adding the vanilla, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Whisk that in, and then you are ready to strain your eggnog and pour it into your pitcher, or in this case I'm using these half-gallon mason jars. The eggnog is pretty thick and it's also hot, so it was kind of difficult to pour, so be careful in this step. Miraculously, somehow I didn't make a huge mess right here. And as you're pouring, if there are any little lumps of egg, the strainer will catch them. So your lumpy eggnog will be saved. And also, I was noticing it was a little bit grainy, which is because I overheated it. I decided to do nothing about this because it was still a very nice texture, just not absolutely perfect. But if the texture had really bothered me, I could have put this in a blender to get rid of that grainy texture, and then it would have had that delicious, smooth, perfectly smooth eggnog texture. When I made this recipe for this video and for my family, I did 1.5 times the recipe, so I ended up with 18 cups, but the actual recipe makes 12 cups. It looks a lot lumpier in the video than it actually was. I think that's just the way that it pours. It was quite smooth, just a little bit grainy. And it was very frothy. If you've never had frothy, warm, freshly made eggnog, I highly recommend that. It's delicious. We usually obviously drink eggnog cold, but I highly recommend having some fresh off the stove, out of the pot when it's still hot. It's so good. If you really want to, you can add alcohol at this point too, but I don't do that, so I don't know how much you would add. I think it's kind of up to you, or you could look up some other recipes, but I don't use the alcohol. It's a non-alcoholic version. There you can see the little bits of egg and lumpiness that the strainer sifted out. Alright, so at this point you can drink it hot, or you can put it in your fridge to chill completely before drinking. And of course, before you pour it, you need to shake it thoroughly, and there is your eggnog. You can add a little bit more milk if you like it less thick and sweet and rich, or you can just drink it as is. Thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to visit my blog for the full written out recipe tutorial.